Hi, it's Jacob, and this is an NYP clip. Click up here to see the full podcast. Enjoy the video. But we're discussing reopening America. Currently in the United States, all 50 states are at least partially beginning to open. They've step towards reopening. And there's a lot of controversy on whether that's the right decision right now. But there's also a lot of economic pain that is occurring with us being home right now. So, and with the lack of a federal unity, it's kind of turned into every state's own plan. So we're going to talk about a couple states, not a couple, like 6 states today, and discuss the differences in their plans and what we think is the most logical option. So, Colton, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I got stuck with Nebraska and Texas, so that's what I chose.
2 worst states, especially Texas.
2 worst states ever, really. So Nebraska's pretty simple. They never had a stay-at-home order, probably because we're a lot more spread out than other states. We only have like 1 major city in Omaha. But we're starting to reopen businesses slightly. Churches, salons, restaurants, they're all starting to come back with limited capacity. I know my church is actually starting to come back. I'll have to go back and I'll be a cameraman for them, doing some stuff. There'll be like a family per like 4 pews or something like that, and you can't leave together and whatnot. It's really difficult because Nebraska, in my opinion, went into social distancing really early, a little bit sooner than they probably should have, which made it a lot harder for people to stay inside. They definitely could have started it later so that we're not as bored and cramped up in one spot. But the not having a stay-at-home order definitely, I think, helped our economy not get completely demolished. People still be able to go out, get groceries and whatnot. Texas. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay.
My biggest concern with the Nebraska plans is we haven't even hit our peak yet.
That is, yeah.
And while we went into social distancing relatively early to other states. If we're being honest here, we probably went to social distancing at the correct time, because with this disease, everything is kind of, you need to get it done 2 weeks ahead of time, or it doesn't matter. Everything's delayed by 2 weeks because this virus has such a long incubation period. So
yeah, that is something that to put into consideration. I mean, we did probably go in right as we should have done, but other states didn't, and I think it shows well because our peak hasn't hit yet because we've been separated for that long at the right time. But I mean,
the next couple of weeks are they're going to be a little scary. Probably my biggest fear. Oh, go ahead.
The CDC even recommends that states don't reopen until 2 weeks after, like 2 weeks of decline. Ours are still climbing up.
Yeah, we're not even halfway through it for Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, Colton, do you want to start on Texas?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Texas. So basically, Texas did have a stay-at-home order, but it expired on April 30th, which was 23 days ago. I don't know what days have 31 days in it. I don't even know. But anyway, so basically, they're starting to allow some things to open up, like restaurants and movie theaters, but that's with a 25% occupancy. And they're actually, this is kind of surprising to me, they're having outdoor sports be allowed, but you can only have 4 people playing at a time. So I don't know what are they playing like Foursquare or something, or I don't know what they're doing.
Like they could play tennis?
Yeah. Golf.
Maybe a game of badminton?
Yeah.
Good solid 4-person race.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, they could play
2-man b-ball.
They can't even play Red Rover. Can't even do that.
Unbelievable.
Malarkey.
Yeah, so that's what Texas is doing.
God damn it, Texas.
Shooting sport trap. That's why they have those.
So like the social distancing have to stay in place, like with the 4 people. So like, there's 4 people, but they have to stay like the 6 feet apart and all that stuff.
No touch football.
I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that's what I read.
I think Texas just doesn't care. I think they're just going all Texas on it, like they normally do.
I mean, they are the Lone Star State.
They're yelling, "Remember the Alamo," and ripping off their mask, and so I've heard a lot of people who are in California because California is on the complete opposite side of Texas with this.
Yeah, 3 months.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in California who are complaining about it. They're like, I'm just going to move to Texas. So I could see a little bit of, because we already saw a lot of people moving from New York already. I could see some people moving from California to places like Texas, because it's kind of a more purpley state for now.
Are they gonna move to the bigger cities, do you think, or
probably? I'm guessing if they come from California, they're not going to move to freaking prairie. So, well, let's move on to New York's with everyone's favorite sweetheart, Andrew Cuomo. New York, they've extended the stay-at-home orders until May 28th for regions that don't meet the state's criteria right now to like start reopening. But there are a lot of regions in New York, the state, that are starting to open up right now, which is good for them. They can start reopening for business, which is nice. It's allowing for a lot of construction to get started again. But this is just phase 1 for New York. So obviously they're getting a slower start, but they were also pretty hardly hit. So anything else about New York?
I got nothing.
California. So California has been a little bit more controversial just because Gavin Nunes, while he is a cutie, he did extend the stay-at-home order for like another 3 months, which hasn't really been what people are doing, like the governors are doing. We've all kind of agreed, just say, oh, it'll be over soon. It'll be over in 2 weeks. And then in 2 weeks, we had another 2 weeks just so we don't have to accept it. And I feel like 3 months might be a little much. But once again, I'm guessing Governor Nunes has a lot more information than I do.
Well, when it comes to California, I mean, their economy is very much built within Silicon Valley, which arguably you can easily do most of that at home.
That is true.
The innovation, while in Nebraska with meat packing and stuff, you can't do that at home.
Yeah, you can't meat pack over Zoom.
That is one thing.
But at the same time, basically telling your citizens that have already been home for 2 or 3 months that they're supposed to stay home for another 3 months. I mean, that for a lot of people, I mean, that's half of 2020 taken away.
Yeah.
Now, I will say California kind of did dig themselves into a hole very early on with this because many people did not listen to that stay-at-home order. They eventually had to line like the police at the beaches because people going to the public beaches. So I think that I'm not saying that's the exact reason why it's having to be extended for 3 months, and I do think that 3 months is probably a little long, at least to announce. You should have. I think the longest you should announce is for like another month, and then keep going with that because I mean there is a chance, and there's a chance in the summer months that for some reason this thing just takes a dive in cases.
Yeah.
So
And obviously it's not written in stone. If a month and a half from now California has 0 cases, they're going to be like, oh, let's go back to work now.
Yeah, and I get that. It's always go worse than what you think it'll be. So that way you look better if like it ends earlier, so you get to end it earlier. But at the same time, it just because I'm looking at their like reported new cases a day stuff right now. Like it stayed pretty like the problem with them is like it stayed level. Like it hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down. It's just staying the same. So yeah, I don't know. It'll have to be something to take a look at. It'll be more clear whether or not it was too much or if it was too much or just right in about a month or so, like end of June, when that's when it'll become clear whether or not that was the correct move or not.
Yeah. And it's hard with the lack of per capita testing that we have to even know what the hell to do and when to do it.
Yeah. Well, also another problem with California is that many people think that coronavirus was there long before it was ever detected.
Oh, I think they know that in most places that's the case.
But especially in California, because you got to think international travel, California has to be one of the hotbeds.
Especially with the Asian area.
Yeah.
So be that guy. But
and I remember, it feels like years ago, but when this stuff was just starting up, Seattle figured out like a couple weeks into when they first started getting it bad in nursing homes that, it was here 6 weeks before we figured it out or like knew it was here at all.
Well, because like if you take a look at California, I think I read something, it was like a long time ago, but they're like January and early February, they had an awful flu season where like more people than normal were dying of the flu. But now many people are wondering, are we sure that was the flu they were dying from because of coronavirus? Because the death rate for flu victims in January in California, I think just like shot up. So yeah, it'll, in terms of their stay-at-home order and their reopening plans, if it's required, it's required. Like that's just that. But at least looking at it right now, especially since their cases aren't necessarily rising, it does seem like a little much.
Yeah. But obviously it would be like, I would be willing to stay home 3 months longer if it was going to prevent a second wave in the fall. The problem with opening up early is that we are going to have a second wave. And that scientists have been expecting that for a while before we started opening up a bit early. But now they're like, for sure. Especially in a lot of these places, mask wearing is still kind of taboo. I had to go to Honda yesterday because my car needed work done. And I was like 3 months over on an oil change because like it was due like March 14th. And then that weekend was when like school stopped. So it was like right when shit started hitting the fan, I guess. So I really needed an oil change and stuff. So I decided that I was going to get a bunch of Clorox wipes and crap and take it in. But I had to go in to pick up my key from the cashier, and not one person had a mask on in that entire Honda place. It was, and they all gave me this look because I had a mask on because I want to be at least somewhat responsible. But no, they all looked at me like I was a dumbass for having a mask on in a pandemic.
Yeah, because the problem is 95% of these people are taking it seriously. The problem is the 5% that aren't.
Well, it's a lot more than 5%, because if every person in Honda doesn't even have a mask on.
I know, I'm being optimistic.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's 50-50 dumb people, smart people. So,
but if I'm not dumb,
you're
dumb. Chris is.
Well, he's a moderate, so we know.
Low blow. That's a low blow.
That's what we do here.
Speaking
we want to move
of,
on to Georgia.
Yeah, let's talk about good old Brian Kemp and his gang.
Georgia, sweet Georgia.
But Georgia, like Texas, was one of the first to announce that they were opening. There are restrictions in place. They opened up. Partial reopening started April 24th, and they kind of reopened a lot of things on April 30th. So before that, there was a statewide shelter in place, stay at home, all that stuff. But ever since then, he's allowed businesses to reopen. That includes gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, art studios, haircut places, nail salons, restaurants, social clubs, movie theaters, all of that. There is some health restrictions in place, but in my opinion, not nearly as much as there should be. But they do have a fairly strict social distance protocol in place. It just many people were, especially since when he said it, he kind of didn't really talk about the social distancing stuff. He basically said we're reopening, which many people took as we're going back to the way it was, which caused many people, especially in Georgia, to be like, "Whoa, wait, what?"
Hold on.
But there is stuff in place, and I will give props to Georgia in this that cases and deaths in their states while this has been in place have been going down. So while you may or may not agree,
didn't they mix up a graph that they put they accidentally put the wrong dates in the wrong places that made it look like it was going down?
I think that was at the very beginning.
Okay.
But now over the past 3 weeks, it has been declining. Now I will say it is not a sharp decline.
Yeah.
It is it's not a flat line, but it's kind of like this. So it's just kind of eking its way down, which I'm not exactly sure it's a good thing, but I feel like if there were better protocols in place, it would be a much steeper decline. And then the other state I had was the good old state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is kind of on a different phases. But the difference is their phases aren't statewide. It's on a county by county basis. So basically they're assigned each county is assigned a color based on how well they're doing. If they're doing okay on cases, right, they're given green. If their cases are basically plateauing, like they're not really rising, they're not really declining though either, they're given yellow, which means like some things are reopened, but overall the restrictions are still in place. And then there's where cases are still rising and deaths are still high, and they're given red, which means shelter in place is still in effect. Places are not really allowed to reopen. So really what it's helping right now is those rural areas where it's not high, because they are pretty much reopened, which many people would say, at least in that state, that the rural areas never really had a problem with COVID. Like there were cases everywhere, but it was not as widespread as it was certainly in the large cities that Pennsylvania hosts. So last I checked, I believe Philadelphia and Pittsburgh were still in the red. But there are some reopening things going into effect. Like there is a racetrack that's going to reopen in June without fans. So overall, I think they've done a pretty good job, especially since they've recognized that not everything in the state is equal in terms of cases and deaths and all that stuff, and basically taking it as okay, you're okay, then you can reopen, but this place over here, you need to stay closed because it's still bad.
What do you guys think about the federal response connected to this?
So at least I feel like there could be more federal assistance. At least in the terms of regular communication and sharing of information. And that goes for everybody. Because right now I feel like some of the bigger states are getting more federal information, while some of the smaller states are getting not a whole lot. So, and I do get it. I do get it where there's going to be more communication between the places that have more people and more cases and more deaths. But what's valuable information to New York is going to be valuable information to Nebraska too. So I think anything that can help, that needs to be regularly communicated. And then assistance any time where the federal government has tests that they can give to states, they need to be giving them to the states. There shouldn't be no holding that. There should be no holding that back for whatever reasons.
I think the biggest problem with the federal response more recently is just the partisan BS that's occurring. It's depressing that like Michigan and Nevada, they're both getting Trump's tweeting about them left and right, and they're just trying to do what's the best for their state. And he's, talking about restricting funding, especially with these mail by vote, absentee voting laws, and allowing mail-in voting. So it kind of sucks that even multiple months into a pandemic, it's still being made political.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did a survey a while back, I think it was like a month ago, where it actually focused in on the absentee ballot voting and whatnot. And then from all the surveys that I did, probably around 40, 50, 60, from around there, a good over half of them, probably a good 60 or 70%, said that they would support absentee ballot required. So I have everyone do absentee ballot, but they all also said that it would be more what's it called? More voter fraud. So
there's this huge concern about voter fraud, and voter fraud, since I'll have to find the article and send it to you guys. Put it in the description. But like voter fraud, it's like 0.00004% of the votes. Like since from 2000 to like 2012, they only found like 460 some occurrences of voter fraud that they found. And like there's so many votes that if anyone's going to make a significant change in the actual numbers, they're going to find out about it. We saw that during the midterms with was it South Carolina?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
I think it was South Carolina, but I'm not for sure on that. I'll make sure I find that article and put it below. But I think people are just paranoid about it, and they think it's a huge issue, but the data says it's not. Like there's a lot more percentage of people who have COVID in the US than people who are committing voter fraud. So
I understand. Yeah, I get all that. But I do say that like we should always be wary of voter fraud in case there is eventually a big attempt of voter fraud in our country. But that being said, absentee ballots, I mean, there's really not a whole lot of evidence that that's going to cause a huge voter fraud scandal. And you know, really, there are many Republicans in Congress that are super against the idea, when I would say absentee ballot is the reason why they just won a new seat from California in the House. There was a special election, and it was all mail-in voting in California, and it was a district where the incumbent had won it by 8 or 9% the last few terms. Hillary Clinton in 2016 carried it by like 10%, and they go to absentee ballots, and the Republican running against the Democrat won by 11 points. So like that is one of the biggest swings I've ever seen. So
yeah, and there are a lot of states who are red that are doing similar things that Michigan and Nevada are doing, and they're not getting tweeted about. President's not threatening to hold funding for whatever. They don't even know what he meant by that.
Well, in Nebraska, mail-in voting has always been a thing. My parents have done mail-in voting for the past nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just a thing. Even Pete Ricketts, a Republican governor, came out and said, "No, we're going to have mail-in voting available because we've always had it available."
And so, I can't think of another reason why Trump isn't tweeting about Pete Ricketts. He's only tweeting about these other people in more purple or blue states. The only reason is politics.
Hmm.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
The other thing with this reopening stuff is that the CDC kind of appears to be trying their best to give guidelines. Do you think the states should follow the CDC guidelines, the experts' guidelines, or do you think they need to kind of take a 50-50 on economics versus scientific data?
So it is good that the CDC is providing guidelines. However, as stated earlier, many states are in different points of how bad this pandemic is. So basically, guidelines that affect all 50 states and like put them all in a box that's all affected the same way isn't really going to work. So I think it's good to be like checking up on the CDC guidelines and absolutely follow the ones that you feel need to be in place. but I don't think it's an absolute positive necessity that every single guideline be followed.
I think much like it is with a lot of my views, I think the CDC guidelines and what they say should be taken as should be taken into recommendation, but not enforced just because they say so, and let states decide what they want to do based off of that. Just kind of let the states make their own rules by the way that they want, and that local government kind of take control.
Yeah, my take with the CDC stuff is obviously we don't live in a perfect world, and the CDC is giving what you should do to be perfect and make sure that you can perfectly prevent a resurgence. And I think that while you don't need to take the CDC stuff verbatim, like if they say X or Y and you don't want to do part of it, I think that's fine as long as it's not a huge risk. But the fact is that the CDC is kind of being ignored, and governors are saying we meet guidelines, and then right after they say that, the journalist or the news article goes on about how they're not meeting the CDC guidelines or the federal guidelines or any guidelines. So it's depressing that like not even people who study pandemics are being listened to.
Yeah.
Who do you guys think is doing it the best way?
Right now, I'd personally say Pennsylvania. Like, and they're not the only ones doing it like that. That's just the one I was talking about. Because I think everybody needs to realize that not everywhere in the state is having the same issue. So keeping it like, okay, this area of the state's doing okay. This area of the state is like getting better, but it's not great yet. In this state, and this area still needs a lot of help. If you keep doing it like that, eventually you'll be able to get all of them down to green while not completely tanking the economy of rural areas because the entire state's under lockdown. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that the New York and Pennsylvania doing their opening up on a county by county basis, I think that's the smartest and most logical idea. That way we can both worry about safety and the economy. It would be really helpful for the entire economy getting up if a couple of these counties that aren't getting hit as hard with COVID get a head start. That would be really good for the economy. But also my only concern with that is people saying, oh, I live in Lancaster County, but Adams County is open. I'm going to go to the bar in Adams County. That's my only concern. And the cell phone data that they've been studying, they've seen a bit of that.
Absolutely. That's something that I was just going to bring up about a negative of that county by county basis, especially in the larger areas where the counties are a lot smaller. But I mean, when it comes to which way is the best, it would definitely have to be that county by county as outweighing the pros and cons for right now.
Yeah, and the other issue with it is, especially in Nebraska, but I'm guessing that it's pretty similar for a lot of other people. There's a lot of people who live in one county
and work in another
county or go to school probably not go to school in another county, but possibly.
Or has family in another county that you visit regularly.
Yeah, and how do people deal with that? Like my house, I can go to work, but my work says I can't, or vice versa. It would probably be a lot worse if work's saying time to come back, and you have to say, sorry, boss, and Lancaster hasn't opened yet.
Mm-hmm.
But
there is no perfect system to something like this. Like there is no way to perfectly stop everything to it, but at the end of the day, you have to take what is the best option, and the county by county basis just seems to be the best option we have right now.
Yeah. It's tough. Nobody knows what is right. So that's the hardest part about this, is that while the experts, they should be listened to, and to be fair to the people who are not listening to the experts, they're just looking at data and telling you what's the most likely to happen. And while like we should trust that, and I'm not saying that, the experts on this should be ignored at all. I'm just saying I understand why some people are a little wary to listening to that.